I think it's an important exercise before any event to remember whose land this is. Before I get into the main body of what I want to say, I want to tell you that I am not here to speak on behalf of any group or organization, any political party or corporation. I'm here really speaking as a grandfather and as an elder. And that's really an important thing. I don't want the David Suzuki Foundation to get audited again. I've been audited 3 times because of my shooting off my mouth, so I'll disconnect myself from them. But I think it's important to realize that elders have a very special role in society. We're past worrying about money or power or fame. Well, there are a few elders that still do, but they've got problems. They need help. Elders don't have to play the same games because we're not running after a job or a promotion or a raise. We can speak the truth from our hearts. And that's a really important state to be in. As an elder, I can tell you that whoever is elected in October and whatever Parliament does in the coming years will have very little effect on me. I'm at the end of my life. It will have very little effect on my life. But for the young people, who is elected and what is or is not done will reverberate through their entire lives. Youth have everything at stake here. Youth must get involved. I'm delighted to see some of the really young ones who are here. I know that they're way beyond voting, but they got mums and dads who love them and grandmas and granddads who love them, and those are the ones who are going to vote on their behalf. We have to think of youth and the consequences of who we elect in this election, because I believe we are at an absolutely critical point for a number of reasons. My grandparents emigrated from Japan to Canada between 1902 and 1904. My dad was born in Vancouver in 1909, my mom in 1911. And they were raised in Vancouver, lived here in Canada all their lives. My mom and dad couldn't vote until 1947 because even though they were Canadian born and raised, they were Japanese. So I've always taken the right to vote very, very seriously. To me, it is the essence of my role in society is to have that vote. And I have voted in every federal election since I turned 21 in 1957. And I have never voted for a party that got into power. Now that's a part of, that is a reflection, it was referred to, that we have a dysfunctional democracy. We're one of the few democracies that still uses first past the post, and we need desperately proportional representation. But I've never given up on the system we have, because throughout my adult life, opposition members were able to register their opposition, were listened to, and could in fact have an effect. Mr. Harper has brought in a completely different attitude, has paid no attention to the opposition, indeed has broken Canadian laws in denying access to information they had every right to demand. The courts have decreed that that Mr. Harper has been in contempt of Parliament, but he continues to refuse to share information that we have a right to. When I heard about the robocalls, I was absolutely astounded that here was something being done to deliberately prevent Canadians from practicing the one right that is so important in a democracy, the right to vote. And I was shocked that our government didn't rise up in anger and say, this was an attack on democracy, we've got to get to the heart of it, we do not approve of this kind of monkey-wrenching of democracy. Instead, our government tried everything they could to keep the issue out of the courts. That's not the kind of democracy and government that I want. I lived in the United States for 8 years between 1954 and 1962, getting an education that at that time we couldn't get in Canada. And in 1957, as I was beginning the last year in college, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first man-made instrument to escape gravity into space. And it was really shocking and it was frightening. The Cold War was in full force and the United States began to spend massive amounts of money trying to catch up. And it was a glorious time for a student. Even though I was a foreigner living in the States, you just had to say, I love science, and they threw money at you. It was great. And they started NASA in 1958, and they began to give money to science departments in universities and students. It was a glorious time. But in 1962, without even soliciting, I got an offer of a job at Stanford University, at the University of California, in Davis, and I deliberately decided that I wanted to live in Canada. I preferred Canada. I took a pay cut to come back. I knew that my grants would be way smaller. But to me, Canada was different. Not better, but different. And that difference mattered to me, and I made my choice. Canada, I felt, was not a nation consumed and glorifying in money. Money seems to be the driving force of the American people, and the reason why people exist is to make more money, and they glorify that. I thought Canada was different. Canada, I came home to, was a peacekeeper, not a war maker, and I valued that. In Canada, the CCF that became the NDP was a respected, legitimate party. In the United States, it would have been regarded as a commie or a pinko organization, and I valued that. In Canada, Tommy Douglas could be one of the great heroes of our nation. Canada was Medicare. Canada, to me, was the equalization payments, where the better off provinces shared some of their good fortune with those provinces that were less fortunate. Canada, to me, meant Quebec and the National Film Board and the CBC. And I have never regretted coming back. I have never regretted that decision I made, but in the last 10 years I have seen the erosion of many of those things that made me treasure this country. I began a career in television. I didn't know it was going to be a career, but in 1962, when I did my first series, and it was a series on science when I was at the University of Alberta, and I went into this medium because I felt that Canadians were woefully ignorant about science, that science was by far the most potent force that was shaping our lives and society, and that it was important for Canadians to be informed about this important area so that they could be involved in deciding how these various new technologies would affect their lives. So I believe that by providing the best information possible to the public through television, that we would be a better informed society and make better decisions. That was my belief, and I'm very proud of my career with the CBC all those years. But in order to pursue his agenda of making Canada a super petro state, Mr. Harper has denied access to the very information, the kind of information that we need to make those best informed decisions. He has shut down avenues of information from research facilities like the Experimental Lakes area, polar research in the summer. He has actually burned or discarded important documents in libraries, government libraries, and he has demanded that scientists be vetted through the Prime Minister's office, I assume, through the government and their publications before they can be delivered to public. He doesn't realize that's not how science works. The minute science is vetted through the lenses of ideology or government, it no longer is credible. It doesn't have any credibility in the international world. He discredits the very kind of information that we need to make proper decisions. So how do we make informed decisions in this society? Do we listen to right-wing think tanks like the Fraser Institute? Do we listen to ideologues? Do we listen to or read the Bible or the Quran and make our decisions? I believe that science is absolutely crucial, and the scientific community is being blocked and undermined in so many ways today. In 1988, Margaret Thatcher was filmed picking up litter in Hyde Park in London. And she turned the camera and said, "I'm a greenie too." In 1988, a man ran for president of the United States and said, "If you vote for me, I will be an environmental president." His name was George H.W. Bush. There wasn't a green bone in his body, but the public, the Americans had made the environment the #1 issue of the time. And he had to say it. In 1988, Brian Mulroney was re-elected. And to show he cared about the environment, he appointed the brightest star to be the Minister of the Environment. Now, I see some people as old as I am here. You remember who that was? Lucien Bouchard. And I interviewed Lucien 4 months after he was appointed. I said, "Mr. Bouchard, what do you think is the most important environmental issue facing Canadians?" And he said, immediately, global warming. I was very impressed. I said, "How serious is it?" And these are his exact words. "It threatens the survival of our species. We have to act now." 1988. And what has happened to that since? Mr. Chrétien signed the Kyoto Protocol. He didn't sign that as a liberal. He signed that as the Prime Minister of Canada. He committed Canada to the Kyoto targets of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And yet, Mr. Harper actually pulled us out of the Kyoto Protocol. I thought that one of Mr. Harper's platforms was law and order. There was an international agreement that Canada had committed itself to, and yet he broke it and pulled us out. Well, I should have known better. He passed a law designating elections every 4 years on specific dates, and broke his own law within months and called an election. What is going on? In in the years that followed 1988, we saw a tailing off of concern about climate for 2 reasons. One was we went into a slight economic bump. We started a small recession. And when there's a recession, we act as if the environment has nothing to do with the economy. And so the economy took over. But hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent by the fossil fuel industry, especially Exxon, and by right-wing think tanks and by right-wing ideologues like the Koch brothers, to promulgate the notion that the science isn't in, that this is junk science that's coming out. Scientists lie and cheat. You've heard of ClimateGate and all that. And that this is, if there is warming, it's a natural process, because global warming, of course, happens over long periods of time. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was set up in part to try to provide a resource of strong information on whether climate is happening, and if so, what is it? The IPCC is one of the most conservative groups you can imagine. Because, wouldn't you say that, Gordon? You're the expert here. This is a member of the IPCC, and these reports have to be vetted through so many levels. They're very conservative, and virtually every report that has come out with targets has fallen short of what has actually happened. The oceans are rising faster and more than we imagined. The temperatures are changing. The IPCC reports, nevertheless, have become more urgent with every year that that passes, because we are facing an enormous crisis. And Canada, of all industrialized countries, is probably more vulnerable to the consequences of climate change than any other nation. We're a northern country. For 40 years, the Inuit have been telling us something's going on in the Arctic. The ice isn't as thick, it's melting faster. Something is going wrong up there. And because we are a northern country, we know the warming is taking place at a much greater rate than in a temperate area. We have the longest marine coastline of any country in the world. Sea level rise, just from the oceans getting a little warmer, water expands. And when the great ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica begin to fall into the oceans, we're going to have massive rises in meters, and maybe even tens of meters. Canada will be more affected than any other country. And then you think of the economic areas that are climate sensitive: agriculture, forestry, fisheries, tourism, winter sports. These are all going to be heavily, and are being heavily impacted by climate change. So when we have a prime minister that says the economy is his highest priority and expertise, it makes no sense that climate change would be ignored. When someone like Sir Nicholas Stern, who was once the lead economist at the World Bank, said that if we do not take serious measures to reduce the risk of climate change, the consequences will be economically catastrophic. Up to 20% of the global economy could disappear. This is not leadership. To me, this is willful blindness on the part of our Prime Minister. We elect him to watch out for us and lead us into the future. I call it an intergenerational crime. By ignoring this, he is dooming future generations to the consequences, and it's only going to get worse for them. I like to contrast the visit of Mr. Obama recently to the oil state of Alaska, above the Arctic Circle, the first president to go above the Arctic Circle. And what did he do? He took it to the Alaskans and said, we've got to act on climate change, and we've got to face the consequences. Contrast that with Mr. Harper, who just spent 5 days in the Arctic and never once mentioned climate change. The impact of climate change is undeniable and is now costing millions, if not billions of dollars. So Mr. Harper has always said, no, we can't act on climate change. The Americans are the ones that we're going to follow. Well, Mr. Obama has been leading in a very different direction from Canada, and there's no evidence that we're going to turn around and follow that. I think that no one really knows what the best way forward is going to be. I think that we need, well, there's no question fossil fuels have to be phased out very, very rapidly, but it goes far beyond fossil fuels. Agriculture and the consumption of meat, and this is something environmentalists don't like to face. Meat is by far one of the greatest contributors to climate change, the way that we raise them and the contribution of methane. We obviously have to phase out fossil fuels, but many other aspects become more efficient. But the opportunity lies in finding the alternative, renewable, non-polluting energy sources. We just have to make a commitment. I think the opportunities are great, and I don't think we have a choice. What astounds, sorry, can I take 2 or 3 more minutes?
Yeah.
A few years ago, I got a call from the CEO of a very large oil company in the tar sands. You would all know the company if I told you the name of it. And he said, would it be possible for me to come down and talk to you? And I said, well, of course, I'd love to talk to you. So the next day he came down, and I welcomed him to my office. I said, I am so honored that you've taken the time. Thank you so much for coming. But before you come in through the door, I would like you to leave your identity as the CEO of an oil company outside the door. I want you to meet me just man to man, as a human being to human being. Well, immediately he was not very happy with that, because clearly he had come down to negotiate something. So he came in, and I said, look, I know this is weird, but I can't see trying to negotiate or fight if we don't start with some kind of common platform of agreement. Surely we first got to agree on what our fundamental needs are before we start negotiating. Well, again, he felt very uncomfortable. I said, look, let me tell you what I mean. If you don't have air for 3 to 4 minutes, you're dead. If you have to breathe polluted air, you're sick. So can we not say all human beings require clean air as our highest priority? I said, you're 60 to 70% water by weight. We're basically a big blob of water with enough thickener added. We don't dribble away on the floor. But our bodies are, they don't hold all that water. It comes out of our skin and our eyes and our nose and our crotch, and we lose water. So we have to keep topping up. If you don't have water for 3 to 4 days, you're dead.
Clean water.
If you have to drink polluted water, you're sick. So I said, Mr. CEO, can you not agree with me? Clean water, like clean air, is our highest priority. And then I said, if you don't have food for 4 to 6 weeks, you're dead. If you have to eat contaminated food, you're sick. So can we put clean food in the soil we grow it in, up there with air and water? And then I said, all of the energy in your body and mine, all of that is sunlight. That energy we need to grow and move and reproduce comes from photosynthesis. Our plants capture that energy, convert it into chemical energy, and then we get it by eating the plants or eating the animals that eat the plants. And we store that chemical energy, and then we burn it and liberate the energy of the sun in our bodies. Can we not put photosynthesis up there? And then what is it that gives us clean air, clean water, clean soil, and clean energy? Guess what? It's the web of living things on the planet. They cleanse, replenish, create what the First Nations call the 4 sacred elements: earth, air, fire, and water. So can we put the variety of life? I said, Mr. CEO, can you not agree with me as a human being? Every person on the planet needs to have those things. So that's got to be the foundation of the way we live. And then we ask, how can we have an economy? How do we make money? And all of those other things. Well, I'm afraid I have to say he couldn't agree with me in the end. And it was unfair of me. He had come down as the CEO of a big company to negotiate. If he were to go back to his shareholders and say, well, I had a talk with Suzuki and I agree with him. We can't do anything to bugger up the air, the water, the soil, or the variety of life. He'd get fired in a flash. Because the shareholders want to maximize the profit they make from their investment. But I believe this is what we have to do. We're going to have in December 195 countries meeting in Paris, negotiating over the atmosphere that belongs to no one, but it belongs to everyone, through the lenses of 195 national boundaries and 195 national economies. Now, how can we possibly expect the atmosphere to be shoehorned into these human demands or these human agendas? This is the 21st conference, COP21 in Paris. And I said to the French ambassador, the first thing you have to do in Paris is to declare the COP meetings a total failure. If COP21 is to succeed, we've got to go a different way. And this is why I begged him, put down air, water, soil, energy, and variety of life. Put that down as a foundation of your negotiations, and then talk about what we're going to do. I fear that won't be done, and certainly Canada has removed itself from this whole process, except insofar as monkey wrenching it as much as we could. So this is a challenge. We face very serious issues today, and I don't believe for a minute that this government is capable of dealing them in the way that is going to be protect the future for our children and grandchildren. So that's why we're all here today. Thank you very much.